Now I'm so excited about this week's video tutorial as this is a collaboration video with Charity from the YouTube channel The Lovely Baker. Now every year Charity creates a Valentine's themed cake that has cute little animals on it, and this year she asked me if I wanted to be involved. So I'm going to be showing you how to make this Valentine's themed cake with these two cute little monkeys on the top. Now, after you've watched this video, make sure that you head over to the Lovely Baker YouTube channel and see the amazing cake that Charity has been making. Now, I will put a link to her channel in the description below, so let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is make my monkeys to go on the top. So for each monkey, what you're going to need is, first of all, I've got my modelling paste. For my modelling paste, I'm combining fondant and some gum paste together. I've got 85 grams of just a white fondant and 35 grams of gum paste. Now I'm actually using the Squire's floral paste. Now you can also use modelling pastes, or you can add some Tylose powder into your fondant. I'm just adding in the gum paste so that it firms up a little bit quicker so that our character will keep its shape. I'm then going to split this up, so I'm going to take 100 grams and colour this in a dark brown, and this is going to be for the main body of our monkey. So I'm using the Colour Splash dark brown and adding in a bit of chestnut by Sugar Flare just to warm that up. I'm then taking the 20 grams and I want this in a light brown. So I'm mixing a really tiny amount of the Colour Splash dark brown with some of the Wilton Ivory. I've then got two small pieces of fondant, so I've got a small amount of white and a tiny amount of black. I've got my edible glue, some modelling tools, a small rolling pin, my craft knife, some edible tints, a bamboo skewer which I've cut down to around 3 inches, but you can just use a cocktail stick. And lastly, I've got a thin piece of wire and I've cut this down to 4.5 inches. Starting with the monkey's head, and I've got a ball of the darker brown, and this one weighs 40 grams. So I'm just rolling that into a ball so it's nice and smooth. I'm then going to flatten it down slightly, and on the front, flatten the bottom half down so it's at a slight angle. For the front of his face, I've got some of the lighter brown, and this piece weighs 4 grams. So I want to roll that out and just flatten that down on my work surface. The back is nice and flat. We're creating kind of oval shape. Running my fingers around that edge, just pinch it as I go round, so this will sit flush on his face. Now I've got another small piece exactly the same size, so before I stick those two pieces together, I roll this out quite thin, so around 1 millimeter in thickness. Pop that oval dome on the top. Create 2 marks coming in around 0.5 centimeter from the edge, and if you imagine a heart, so his eyes are going to sit in the top of a heart, just bring it round into a point in the center. Just bring that down, drawing in the rest of the heart. Now if you have a heart cutter which is around 1 inch wide, then you can also use that. Bring back in my face, place that in the center, take a small amount of edible glue, smooth these two together, pop a small amount of edible glue on that bottom, bring back in the front of his face, just sticking that down. I want to run my fingers just around that, just joining all of those pieces together. So there we've got the start of our monkey's head. Now, keeping them quite far apart, I'm going to use the end of my Dresden tool, or if you just got a tool with a point on the end, and create 2 ovals. I'm also going to put 2 little marks where his eyebrows are going to go. And just on the side of this lighter piece, I'm going to draw a little smile, and at the top, just push in my Dresden tool. Now, taking some of the black fondant, roll out 2 identical size oval shapes, pop in a small amount of edible glue into those holes, pushing those down. You then want the smallest amount of white. So I've got 2 really tiny little balls I'm going to stick onto his eyes. For his eyebrows, I've got a very tiny ball of the darker brown, which I'm going to roll out and taper down on both sides. Trim these down so each one is around 3 to 4 millimeters. And again, attaching these with some edible glue, just using my Dresden tool to pull them round. For his nose, I've got a small ball of the darker brown, and just roll on one side until you get a small oval shape. Stick this on the front. Now, taking my Dresden tool, push into each side of his nose. These are going to create 2 nostrils. Now for his ears, I'm going to be using 2 small balls. I've got a ball of the darker brown, which is around 1 centimetre across, and a ball half the size in the lighter one, so this is half a centimetre. With the wider one, flatten that down slightly. Do exactly the same with the slightly lighter one. Place the lighter one on the top. Cut these directly in half. Using my ball tool, I'm going to push that into the ear, flattening those 2 colours together, and then going to bring the 2 edges together and roll this into a slight cone. So just chopping that end off. I'm going to do the same on the other one. So just pushing that ball tool in, just working it around. Now on his ear, I'm going to first of all mark the position. Come across to where this heart shape meets the front of his face. Pop a small amount of edible glue inside. And using the other end of my ball tool, so the smaller side, place the smaller ball tool inside and just push this into his head. Using a small amount of edible glue just onto those edges, I can then stick that securely to the side. Finishing off his head with a few tufts of hair at the top. So I've got some of the darker brown, rolling that, tapering it down, adding in some hair marks, and then be trimmed off into 2 pieces. These can then be popped on the top of his head. Now, before I start working on his body, I'm going to take my bamboo skewer at the bottom of his head, push in a little hole so that we'll be able to join him onto his body. For his body, I've got a ball of the darker brown. Now this one is 35 grams, so it's just slightly smaller than his head. And creating a cone, I'm going to push this onto my work surface, create a flat bottom. So we want to make sure that we're creating each piece separately and letting them dry slightly so that when we do add that head onto our body, it's nice and firm and isn't going to collapse on itself. Now I'm going to pop the bamboo skewer into the body. Now this is slightly too tall. I'm going to take a small amount of that off. I've then got 4 grams of the lighter colour. Roll that out, keeping that oval shape, and just drape that, leaving around 1 centimetre at the top. Trim off the excess, tuck underneath the body. Now I'm going to take my 2 fingers and just push these in at the front, creating 2 grooves, and this is where his arms will sit. For his legs, I'm starting with his feet. So I've got 2 balls of the lighter brown, which are 1 centimetre in diameter. Taper that down slightly on one side and just push that down. Slightly wider on one side. You want to cut in and then straighten that off. So we're removing a triangle. And I'm going to create 3 fingers. So I'm adding in 2 little slits. Pull those apart and just stretch those out and pull them into points. Now, where the fingers meet, push in a slight line, which is going to help me just curve those fingers round. Now, I'm going to add in a few details. So just on the fingers here, I'm going to add in some little nails, and also on that thumb, add just some knuckles. And then going to add in the palm, bringing that round so we get a little foot. And I'm going to do the same for the one on the other side. For his legs, I've got 5 grams of the darker colour, and I want to make this a long sausage. Once it's just over 2 inches, cut that in half. Taking the first one, push on the rounded end slightly, bring back in his body. Now pushing that flat piece against the side and just pushing that in to join those together. I can then use my Dresden tool, and where the edge of the leg joins the body, I'm going to push in to give us this crease. And I'm going to do exactly the same to the other side. Now on the ends of our legs, and just add in some lines. It looks like hair. Now add in some edible glue, can attach my 2 feet, and again just going in with my Dresden tool, pushing the 2 pieces together, just adding in some lines. So there we've got his 2 little legs. Now for his arms and his hands, I've got a larger ball of the darker brown. This one is 5 grams. I've then got 2 smaller balls of the lighter colour, and these are around 7 millimeters. Starting with one of the smaller balls, I'm going to create his hands as if he's got fists. Slightly tapering that down into a point and then flattening that down. Got a slight dome shape. Cutting in, there we've got the thumb. Using my Dresden tool on the back, I'm going to push into that just to pull that round slightly. Push in 2 dents, just bring some marks up. Now I'm going to put in some details, so his knuckles as we did on his feet. and that's going to give us one fist. Now I'm going to do exactly the same for the other side. For his arms, I'm again using one piece, rolling this out. I actually want this one slightly tapered on my two ends. And monkeys have quite thin arms. So I'm rolling it out until it's around 1/2 centimeter in diameter. Chop this in half. So we want to check the length. So we want it to come from the top and just stop around 1/2 centimeter from the bottom, and make the other one the same length. Now on the flat end, use my cone tool, pushing that in. This is going to allow us to push in our hands, going in, just add in some lines so it looks like hair. Now when I attach these to his body, I want them to come from the top and come round. Now around halfway up, I want to put a bend. So I'm going to take my Dresden tool and just push that in. And then where his elbow is, I'm just going to pinch slightly. Using my Dresden tool, I'm then going to push in, join the two pieces together and make them look like those arms a part of his body rather than just being stuck on. For his hands, I'm going to slightly tip that forward and add some edible glue, and I can push in his little fists. Now, the last thing to do for his body is add on his tail. Now, you can have his tail just coming round onto the board. I want to have his tail sticking up. So in order to allow it to form its shape, I'm going to use my piece of wire. So I'm just curling round, and you can make his tail any shape you like. Taking some of my darker brown, around 3 grams, roll this into a long thin sausage. You then want to use your craft knife, create an opening all the way down, add in a small amount of edible glue, push the modelling paste onto the wire and just close it up as you go. Now before we get to the end of the wire, I'm going to trim that off. So there's around 1 centimetre left. Now on the end of my wire, I'm going to create a little loop. Now you can add some edible glue on to the bottom and push this in and allow it to dry. One way to speed it up is if you do have a kitchen blowtorch, and just heat up just the end of that wire, so not getting any of that gum paste, and that's going to melt the wire onto the gum paste, securing that tail with a bit more of your modelling paste, holding it in place with an extra piece until it dries. So there we have his head and his body. Now I'm going to leave these to one side until they've firmed up for around about an hour before I put them together. Now to finish these off, I'm going to take his head and just on his cheeks add on a tiny amount of pink and just a small amount just inside base of his ears. On his body, create some shadows. So just where his arms join his body, I'm going to run a small amount of that darker brown just on any of those creases that we created. Now the body and my head are not completely hard, but they have firmed up slightly. So I'm going to add some edible glue. I'm then going to take his head where we added that hole, push that on. So there we have our little monkey. Now, because it is a Valentine's cake, I need to have 2 monkeys. So I've created another monkey in exactly the same way. You can keep these exactly as they are, but so you can tell the difference, I'm gonna create some little flowers to add onto this monkey's head. I've got some small pieces of fondant. So I'm gonna start with one of the pinks and just roll this out. Once that's rolled around 1 millimeter in thickness, cut out some strips. So these are going to be around 1/2 centimeter in width. Just going to start to roll that up, just creating a bit of a ruffle on the outside, and then pull off the edge and cut off the excess. And that's given us this really simple little rose. And this is just creating a little kind of headband that's going to go on one side of her head. I've also got a small piece of purple and just this daisy flower plunger cutter. Cut out a few of those. With my Dresden tool, push that on each of the petals and then push this into the center, and on the back pull that up to give us this tiny mini flower. And lastly, with the green, I'm going to create some leaves. So I'm going to take a very small ball, taper that down on one side, take my Dresden tool and just run that along the center and pinch it at the bottom, which is going to give us this really cute cartoon leaf. So bringing back in one of my monkeys, add a small amount of edible glue onto the side of her head, and then add on some of those roses, taking some of those leaves, building it up. So once you're happy with the amount you've added, there we have her with these flowers in her hair. Now, because this is Valentine's themed, I'm gonna create some little Valentine's cards to go around my cake. So I've got some white fondant and a small amount of red. Roll out my white fondant until it's around 2 millimeters in thickness and cut out some rectangles. So these are just 2 centimeters by 1.5 centimeters. I'm gonna slightly round off those corners. And using my Dresden tool, create a triangle at the top and then add 2 lines coming down from this to create the pattern of an envelope. Now, in order for these lines to stand out, because I know how hard it is on the white, I've got a small amount of shadow grey edible tint. Run this along those lines. Now, to make some little hearts to close the envelope, I'm going to take a small ball of my red, taper this down on one end into a point and just flatten that down. With my Dresden tool, push this in, create a heart, and that's going to give us these little Valentine's cards. With one of them, chop the bottom corner off. I can then bring back in my monkey and just tuck that under his arm so he's got this really sweet little Valentine's Day card. So for the cake that my monkeys are going to sit on, I've got a 6-inch cake. Now this one is around 5 inches in height, and I've popped this on a 9-inch drum board. Now for my cake and my board, I've covered these separately in some white fondant, and I will put a link in the description below to a video showing you exactly how to cover your cakes and how to cover your boards to this stage. Now for my cake, I've actually offset this slightly so the cake is sitting further towards the back. This is going to give me a bit of room at the front, and I'm going to make some leaves. So I've just coloured some gum paste, or this is the Squire's floral paste, in 2 shades of green. I've then got some of the leaves from the FMM Tropical Leaves set. Flip these over and just roll your rolling pin over the back. I'm going to run some lines along the leaves and just pinch that bottom slightly. Now I'm going to leave these to dry. You might want to use some paintbrushes or some spoons. Give it a bit of shape so it doesn't dry completely flat. Okay, so I've left all of my cake decorations for a little while so they're a bit firmer. First of all, just working out where they're going to go. So I'm going to have them slightly leaning into each other. I'm going to use some royal icing to stick these down. Now, I always get asked about the royal icing I use, and I tend to use royal icing sugar, and to this you add water and you mix it up to give you your royal icing. You can also buy it pre-made. I'm then going to take those little Valentine's cards that we've got left over and pop these in between the leaves just to match the one that my monkey is holding on the top of my cake. So here we have the finished Valentine's themed cake with these 2 cute little monkeys on the top. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and will be able to use it to make your own monkey cake toppers. I'll also put a list of all the tools that I've used throughout today's video and links to the Lovely Baker YouTube channel. So don't forget to head over there and check out the cake that Charity has been making. Okay, until next time, bye!